Hey everyone, Rita here. Wanted to poke in before the episode again, just to let you know, with this whole new podcasting thing for me, sometimes tech is obviously not on my side. And so this week's interview is spectacular, but there are a couple tech hiccups. I did try to and clear as many as I could, but I just wanted to give a disclaimer. There are some temporary fuzzies that happen throughout the episode, but please stick through the episode because it is gold. And especially if you are a corporate executive or an HR executive, you definitely want to hear Ryan's perspective on these programs and how it benefits you and your company overall. So that is my little disclaimer. Second, Retreat Anchor is still out in the open for you. There's going to be links in the show notes. So if you, after you have heard all the amazingness that has been brought onto Ryan's company because of having the Retreat at Sea program, and you kind of want to get into more of the knowledge base and the planning to get your own off the ground, please visit the links in the show notes and you can purchase Retreat Anchor and start the planning process. So let's get into it.
Welcome to the Stronger Tides Podcast, the podcast for small business entrepreneurs and corporate executives to learn more about increasing their client or employee retention through a group cruise program. Ready to drop anchor? Here's your host, travel advisor Rita Perez.
Alrighty, hello everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm so excited to have you today. I have a really awesome guest on. His name is Ryan Schram, and he is actually the COO of IZEA. They are a technology company based right here in Orlando, and they are actually the founders of influencer marketing. I have worked with Ryan, I think it's been 5 or 6 years now, to put on his annual corporate retreat at sea for him and his team here. So hello, Ryan.
Hey, Rita. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome to the show. I'm so excited that you decided to come on to the Stronger Tides podcast. I know the listeners are going to get so much value out of our conversation from today, because I know some of them that are listening are like, okay, you've mentioned all this really great stuff, but I need to hear from someone who's actually done it before.
No, that's a great point. I'm really thankful for you having me on and excited to share our experiences.
Awesome. Yay. So where did the idea for a retreat at sea come about?
Well, really, it was the genesis of 3 different things. The first thing that you mentioned was we're based in Orlando like you are. And of course, Orlando being the global hospitality hub that it is, you have to be able to do something that's different than what your team members can ordinarily do just in their own backyards on the weekend or when they're on vacation.
Yeah.
So we had done different sort of hotel-based mini conferences and summits and things like that. What we realized was, gosh, Florida is a peninsula, and we are so fortunate. We kind of overlook this from time to time, but there are an ample number of ports that take you to a lot of different destinations, and that change of scenery can be so beneficial. Mm-hmm. So when I joined the firm in 2011, we tried out a retreat at sea for the very first time, and not only for our Florida-based team members, which is about half of our headcount as a company, but for the other half that lives in New York and Chicago and Toronto and Los Angeles and Denver, they thought it was a pretty novel thing too.
Okay. I was going to ask, when you presented it to the team, what did they think? What was the reception?
Well, candidly, it fell in a couple of different camps. I think the first camp was a cruise ship. For people that have cruised before or recently, to them, it's somewhere between the Love Boat and Titanic, right? They just have no context for modern sailing. And they certainly don't think about it necessarily in a business context. If anyone had gone for work before, it was probably because it was some sort of reward or incentive for a previous job, as opposed to being able to mix, sailing with ongoing education and really growing your culture. Mm-hmm. So I think there was a lot of sort of palace intrigue, if you will, of what is this going to be like? What can it be like? And at the same time, people were excited because we were taking them places that they hadn't necessarily been before and mixing a lot of the stuff that would otherwise be done in sort of a windowless conference room in a hotel or a convention center on land with a
Yeah.
change of scenery on top of really cool activities that you can't do anywhere else in your free time.
Yeah. On top of being able to travel to a foreign country.
Well, certainly. I mean, and you kind of we gloss that over being Floridians that like a good chunk of the country has never really been to parts of the Caribbean before, hasn't been to
Yeah.
Mexico before, and if they have, it's probably to like an all-inclusive where they went straight from a nameless, faceless airport to their destination and never left.
Yeah.
So it really is one of those interesting nuances of being able to take advantage of certainly where we're based, but also the economies of scale that come with the cruising industry overall on top of it.
Hmm. Yeah. Now, what compelled you and IZEA to make this sort of investment into your team?
That's a great question. I think for us, we look at ourselves as a mission bound organization that ongoing education is not simply something we put in the pamphlet that you get on your first day and say, all right, well, we just try to teach people things here. We actively seek ways to invest in our people and really further ourselves in terms of our operational culture and belief system as team members. And
Hmm.
so this idea of a retreat really allows you to do that in a number of different ways. First, it gets people out of their normal routine. Forgetting for a second that like we have people that are in Orlando and everyone's familiar with sort of Orlando hotels and conference centers.
Yeah.
I think the idea of changing locality actually shifts the mindset of the people
Yeah.
coming into a retreat, right? And on top of that, by changing that locality and also putting everyone onto the same vessel for 5 days and 4 nights or whatever the duration happens to be,
Hmm.
you now have this sort of adult luxury camping thing going on
Yeah.
because you're all together all day every day, and even when you're off agenda and you're just in your free time, you're able to actually get to know your colleagues in a way that you would never otherwise be able to experience.
Yeah.
And then lastly, although high-speed connectivity has gotten so great at sea in recent years, I was FaceTiming with my boys each night from my cabin and having no
Oh,
problem when we were at sea in January of 2020. Um, but at the same time, cell service is something that you'd only use in an emergency circumstance. So what that means is that people are really dialed into the content that you have going on. They don't have to worry about that commute home from the conference center because they're sleeping in the same place where the conference center is, which happens to
yeah.
be a large vessel at sea, and
Yes.
they're around their colleagues. So we also just see the attention span, elongating, and the absorption of the materials that we share as executives or my colleagues share as professionals, with their team members being so much higher because those distractions are really eliminated.
Hmm. Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I wanted to bounce off that idea too of excitement just to be getting away somewhere with your team, because that's not something I necessarily had considered as one of the excitement factors for the team. Of course, like they're excited to go on a cruise. And I kind of relate it to myself, like this past cruise. And I had my sparkly jacket on the first
Yeah.
night. I was just so excited for you guys and to get started and for everybody to receive that education. I don't know if they're so much excited about that part, but I can tell that everybody is like geared and they have that mentality that, okay, we're going to get away and this is going to be, in a sense, a little bit of mandatory fun, but we're really going to get a lot out of it. I think they have that understanding as well that not only do they have to work in a sense, but they're going to have a lot of fun with their colleagues and the whole travel aspect, the cruise aspect with all the activities on top of the retreat component.
Yeah, it really works well in so many different ways, Rita, and I'm glad you pointed that out. I think that too frequently in most traditional organizations, people being voluntold, if you will, to get something out of company meetings is
Hmm.
is in essence the reason why they're not particularly effective.
Hmm.
So we really tried to break down the psychology of what makes for a successful retreat. And we started that conversation with our team members. And we said, all right, we as your employer respect that if we're going to ask you to be away from your loved ones for
Yeah.
3 or 4 nights, we have to bring an A game that's worthy of you giving us
So
that kind
true.
of time, right?
Hmm.
And while there certainly is much has been made in my category in technology of work hard, play hard, and like you could argue that like it's great that people are spending this kind of time, but at the end of the day, whether you have kids or you don't, or whether you have a significant other or you don't, being able to ask someone to take that time is something that I see as a privilege. So, being able to layer on the opportunities to give them a world-class experience, to have an opening keynote like we did in the
Yeah.
ship's theater, right? With,
That's so
cool robotic
awesome.
lights and the fog machines and like the massive, I mean, just like things you can never get on land. Like those things I think really matter. It's kind of how you produce the event. The
Yeah.
content is of course part of that, but it really comes down to how can you give people something that defies their expectations and certainly exceeds them in the end. And then
Hmm.
you mix that with the ability that when you say, all right, we're done for the day, they can go off and experience a new foreign country. They can go just have, if they're not into the touristy stuff, they can go into a quiet corner of the pool deck or the beach and read a book. There's something for everyone, and that was one of the big things that we had to open our team's eyes up to was that really cruising is what you make of it. It doesn't
Hmm.
just have to be the things that they showcase on the promo videos for the ship. Those happen to be some of the cooler things that are attractive to most people. But
Yeah.
even for the most introverted, low-key person who just wants to unwind after a day of working, there's opportunities for them on board or on shore as well.
Definitely. Yeah. So, talking a little bit about the content, how do you decide every year what you want to present during the retreat?
Oh, I wave my magic wand and it just appears on digital paper, Rita. No, I wish that was the case.
Yeah.
We diligently survey our teams at the end of every retreat every year.
Okay.
And we asked them to grade every single session, whether it was an all company session or a breakout. And we looked at that data and use that data to shape what we know to be fan favorites, either in categories of content, ways of actually communicating it,
Hmm.
or just the pacing overall of it. And I think that those three ingredients are things that most executives tend to overlook, right?
Hmm.
We like to think as, the folks who help run the show that everyone's just dying to listen to us talk for hours on end, in front of a fancy podium.
Yeah.
And you kind of have to remove yourself and look at it from the perspective of, some people learn in different ways.
Yeah.
Some information doesn't need to be communicated to everyone. And in fact, in some cases, you can get better results by really getting specific on what audiences you're trying to teach what and what audiences would benefit from knowing everything.
Hmm.
And then also utilizing the venues that exist around the ship or even really large singular venues to break up the space. No one, myself included, likes to sit there and stare at someone for an hour or 2 hours straight and try to keep your eyes
No.
open, right? Instead, we found that doing rotation stations that happen to be 15 or 20-minute quick bursts and people rotate between 5 or 6 different topics with breaks involved in between tend to get the greatest consumption of knowledge of our team members and rate the highest in terms of what they prefer. They love hearing from my boss, Ted, who created the company, and have him lay out the vision. So that can be a longer session that involves everyone.
Yeah.
You want to sometimes just spend time with their colleagues who, on the surface, you would say, well, wait a second, these people spend time together all the time. Why would you set aside agenda time just for people to, seemingly spend time with the people they're already there with the most? And the answer to that question is that, well, geez, actually there's things that happen outside of the day to day that folks really want to dig into when they have the time to unpack it and talk freely, where they're not, bookended by other obligations or client
Exactly.
meetings or what have you. So this really gives you the luxury of time to let people get into the meat of those conversations and feel like they're achieving things on their own terms.
Yeah, that I was going to say that I feel is a huge chunk of it, that you are outside of the normal realm. So where you would be in the office setting, you have your agenda for the day, you have to accomplish 5 tasks, and you have to make sure that those tasks get done. You don't have almost that burden to accomplish these tasks. It's more fluid when you're on the retreat.
Oh, no doubt about that. And it's also, I would suggest to other companies who haven't done this yet, if you're going to make the investment, it's not just the investment of planning a retreat or paying for it. It's frankly messaging to your team members how you as executives see its importance. Like what we tell our team going into it is, unless something is absolutely on fire, meaning like
Yeah.
a client issue that we would drop everything for, treat this as if the company was closed down for 4 days, right? And this should be your number one and only priority, to be with your colleagues, to be 110% dialed in, and knowing that this is something that we, as your leadership, are so serious about that it should be priority number 1, 2, and 3, unless
Yeah,
there's something totally crazy going on.
definitely. So what do you look forward to the most when, like, let's say it's a week before you've gotten like most of the work out of the way and it's time to like really start thinking about heading on the ship? So minus all the packing stuff, what do
Yeah,
you
sure.
look forward to the most heading onto the ship that day?
There's three things that I like to look forward to, and you know me, Rita, I'm kind of cheesy, so forgive me. But
Oh yeah.
like the first thing I look forward to is seeing my team members all throughout North America. Once they come up the gangway and they just get on board, and the look on their face of just
Yeah.
excitement. There's this look of, I can't believe my employer is doing this. I can't
Yeah.
believe my employer is paying for this. And oh, I'm going to post it on Instagram so all my friends feel jealous, right? Like they want that FOMO moment, which makes me feel good because it means that we selected an awesome ship, that they're
Yeah.
happy to be there. And frankly, that's a huge point of differentiation as an employer, is you want all your team members to feel included and excited about what they're doing every day. But when
Yeah.
you're doing something like that truly is like iconic,
Yeah.
that's a great feeling. I also look forward to, just the reaction of how much our team members care for and respect their colleagues. Something
Yes.
like 95% of our content is not created by members of our leadership team. It's created by the peers of all the people that are benefiting from it. So that sort of reciprocal acknowledgement and respect for the work that goes into preparing content that people will benefit from and appreciate is something that I think is sometimes overlooked, but can't be understated in its importance. And then lastly, at night, I'm getting up here in age, and I don't stay out as late as some of our younger team members or our young at heart team members who just have way better endurance than I do. But I do in the evenings, after we're done with dinner, and I'm walking around the ship just to see what's going on. It makes me so happy to see groups of colleagues who would otherwise not spend time around each other, not because they don't like each other, but they just don't have the opportunity to, from different work groups and different departments inside our organization, getting to not only know one another, but oftentimes bleeding into work topics that continue to benefit the company for
Yeah.
years after that sort of seemingly subtle conversation. We call those collisions, right? Like the things that you never want to force, and frankly, you can't manufacture. But
Yeah.
if you give team members the opportunity to have them, they tend to have really, really meaningful byproducts.
Yeah. Um, I just wanted to go back to your first point because I will never forget. I don't know who it was, but it was one of the team members, and I feel like he was part of leadership too. And you had asked him, "So, what do you think of the ship?" And we're here in this beautiful auditorium and the beautiful atrium, and what he said that like it was like an upgrade, a step above. I know for you how great it made you feel, but like for me as the advisor, having planned everything on the back end, it's kind of like, man, I did something right.
No, and that's just it. These are not one or two person capable logistics. You have to have a trusted advisor like yourself to be able to really know these cruise lines, know these ships, work with the onboard staff to facilitate
Mhm.
all of that, and really you help make it easy for us because there's so much work if we tried to do that by ourselves that we'd absolutely screw it up, and at the end of the day, it would never be as good as if you did it. So like it makes it so much better and easier for us, and our team notices that. And frankly, part of the thing that I enjoy the most now is, and you know this, is like after every retreat, we try to figure out, all right, not only how do we make the content better for next year, but like
Yeah.
how do we level up, either the ship, the destination, the whatever, the venues on board, like all that stuff is part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So after the retreat is over, everybody's gone back, refreshed a little bit, and they're back in the office. What is the office environment like? Or can you tell me a comparison that last day at the office versus the first day back?
Sure. I think that last day at the office, there's sort of that buzz around. We've traditionally left on Thursdays, so it's usually the Wednesday that is the last day in the office, and
Mhm.
people are looking forward to all sorts of things. They're printing out their materials to do check-in. They're looking at the agenda one last time just so they know what is going on. They're talking about what they're going to do with some of their downtime. There's just all that excitement that goes into taking full advantage of the entirety of each day on board, whether it's structured content from the company or free time that you have on your own.
Mhm.
And there's the anticipation because really no one retreat for us is like the year before it. Thematically, content or otherwise, we may choose to use different timing flow techniques that we saw work well the year before, but the content is always different inside of those different time slots that may use
Yeah.
that same technique. So there's, I think, just the anticipation from our team members' behalf of like, what am I going to hear this year that I didn't hear last year? Um, we've also been growing so much. So about anywhere between 15 to 20% of our staff year to year has never been on the year before. So it's fun to hear team members who are retreat veterans sharing their experiences of the past and helping them get the leg up on what their experience is going to be like.
Oh, cool.
And then when we get back, it's not even just the first day. I mean, certainly there's the really great feeling of cultural investment and the byproduct of people feeling great coming off of the ship. But what
Mhm.
I really would say is it's in the months after that you'll hear it in different conversations. It'll be made up, it'll be said as like oh, we talked about this in the retreat, dot, dot, dot. Or based on the content that we heard in the retreat, we want to do this. It shapes so much of what the year is going to be for us. And that's frankly why we put ours at the start. We're a fiscal calendar year organization. And so to be able to start our year with people in planning mode really helps galvanize what we're going to do in the months and quarters following it.
Okay. Wow, that's awesome. I didn't think it was such a lasting effect. I would think that it's, maybe a couple days, maybe a couple weeks, and then it kind of like dies down.
I would you would think so on the surface, but I think that goes back to if you treat the investment of time with the respect that it deserves,
Mhm.
you're going to get byproducts that come of it because good planning creates good action, and
Mhm.
ultimately we take that time really seriously. and make a point to follow the game plans that we build off of those onboard conversations.
Yeah. And one final question. It kind of is about the competitive advantage that you have, either in terms of HR. Would you say that this is something that you bring up during hiring? Like, oh, and also we have a retreat at sea bonus. So that's one question. But would you say against other competitors in your field that this also gives you a competitive advantage in the talent that applies for your positions?
We do on both sides. So by all means, during the recruiting process,
Mm-hmm.
we make a point to talk about the fact that we not only have an annual company retreat, but it happens to be on a Caribbean or Mexico cruise. That is pretty compelling to most people. It's pretty unusual for companies to actually make a point to say that. They're not just sending the executives to a fancy location. We bring everybody. In fact, even our
Yeah.
part-time employees come. It's really spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that, while that we don't want that to clinch the deal as to why someone comes to work at IZEA, but
Yeah.
we do want them to be one of the reasons that they're proud to work at IZEA, right?
Yeah.
The idea that there is this continuous investment in growing them as people and as executives and as contributors. And I think when we look at our space, influencer marketing is hyper competitive. It's growing like crazy. But the kinds of ways that people who have come to our organization from competitors, they describe the connectivity between our team members, not just the care for other people, which is the good emotional part, but the co-investment in one another to win, and using that co-investment to be humble but hungry really manifests itself when you see the entire team together in such a thing as a retreat at sea.
Mm-hmm. Well, I feel like I learn something new every time I talk to you. We always have amazing conversations. And man, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing your experiences. Any last words that you want to say before we sign off?
Well, no, thanks again for having me on. And for executives who've never taken their team onto a retreat at sea, like we've talked about today, take a really hard look at it. It is cost effective, it is unique. It's also a huge opportunity, if done correctly, to really reshape your company's trajectory, be it for a year or, in our case, many years, and can be a foundation for all sorts of wonderful things to an organization. It's definitely worth the extra look.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Ryan. And listeners, if you have found value in this and you want to hear more about Ryan's insight with his own personal experience, let me know and maybe we'll have Ryan back. If Ryan, would you be willing to come back?
Anytime, Rita. Anything for you.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right. Have a great week, everybody. Stay safe. And until next week, I'll see ya.
Thanks for joining us on the Stronger Tides podcast. Please subscribe to our podcast. And if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating or a share with your colleagues. Find us on social media at Rita Ventures Group Cruising and online at ritaventures.net. Until next time, happy sailing.